Again, I want to welcome you. I guess my only opening comment is I recommend that if you have nothing to do Thursday, Friday, or Saturday evening, that you come to the high school and to enjoy the high school play, Chicago. I'm sure you won't regret coming out and spending the night and maybe bringing your little ones. It'll be a nice family night for student entertainment. So after that, I guess I'll turn it over to the superintendent.
Thank you, Dr. Ryan. To begin tonight, we have our student showcase, this week on anti-bias programs and celebrating diversity. So Dr. Holstra, I will go back to you.
Thank you so much. We have a short video and then we're going to have a student speaker come up and present all the work. So thank you for all who contributed. We really appreciate it. We'll roll with it.
Long Beach Schools is working to confront bias, to celebrate diversity, and to foster a sense of belonging for all students. Our Choose Love social-emotional curriculum begins in pre-K. Students are encouraged to make heroic choices and practice courage, gratitude, forgiveness, and compassion. Students read Nico's spots, share some kindness, bring some light. They created kindness lanterns. Our youngest learners made lanterns to thank others. Older students made lanterns that showed how they bring life to others. Our high school and middle school engage in this work with the African American Club, Multicultural Club, Queenstown members, and No Place for Hate. Our students shared excerpts of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s Life's Blueprint.
Number one, your life's blueprint is your equally in your own dignity, your own worth, and your own somebody.
Don't allow anybody to make you feel that you are nobody. Always feel that you count, always feel that you have worth, and always feel that your life has ultimate significance.
Secondly, in your life's blueprint, you must have as a basic principle the determination to achieve excellence in your various fields of endeavor.
You're going to be certain as the days and the years unfold what you will do in life, what your life will be. And once you discover what it will be, set out to do it and to do it well.
Be the best at whatever you are.
And finally, your life blueprint must be a commitment to the eternal principles of duty, love, and justice.
The series mission is to promote diversity through our old Long Beach High School and to all the high school kids here, and really unite all of us as one. I love this spirit because it makes you feel like a family.
I'm proud member of the Spirit Club because I get to help those in less privileged situations that I am in, as well as be able to spread awareness about diversity and the effects that can have on the community.
One of the Spirit's projects that we completed to promote diversity and inclusion are cultural food sales during homecoming. We sold food from all cultures to help introduce people to food that they might not traditionally experience. Our event, this Carnival, allows us the opportunity to speak freely about our ideas for the club, support those ideas, and serve as a mentor for future events.
Our One Beach Read Aloud of Nancy Chernan's Martin and Anne engaged our students in thinking about how we can be vehicles of positive change in our world. Our students shared positive themes, ongoing struggles, and how we can build bridges together. Carl Wilkins came to share how he engaged in restorative work after the Rwandan genocide of the Tutsis. He shared the power of human connection in addressing hate and fear.
Naming that numbers is for when we got to interview Holocaust survivors and learn their stories.
He
taught us about the resilience and the strength that Holocaust survivors went through. We interviewed them individually, and we got to hear their stories and learn their story.
Names on numbers is important to me because it addresses anti-Semitism and something that it's kind of embarrassing to dress on your own.
I think that everyone should experience and hear these stories so that history doesn't repeat itself and the Holocaust will never happen again.
Our high school social studies teacher shared excerpts of names and numbered survivor accounts with their classes. Thank you to all who shared their ongoing work. To those celebrating, Ramadan Mubarak. Our work as a community continues.
Now I'd like to invite Lucy Nashville to speak on behalf of the police department.
Hi, I'm Lucy Nash, a sophomore at Long Beach High School and the president of our No Place for Hate Club. The No Place for Hate organization works with the Anti-Defamation League to help put an end to violence and bullying. We help do this by showing support for one another. We added a sign on the east gate using pudding cups that say LBHS United. Recently, we had a popcorn fundraiser to help enhance the sign on the west gate. We have created different presentations that are available to teachers to provide lessons on subjects such as microaggressions, social justice, and education quality. We are also happy to take requests on lessons our school community would like to develop. You can get access to the lesson plan by emailing me or Jeffrey.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Ostroff, and all of our staff members and students who contributed to that video. It makes us very proud of this district and that we're doing all these wonderful things to promote acceptance in the community. Tonight is a very special night, and we get to recognize two of our administrators who have satisfied all of the criteria for tenure in the district. And for that reason, I'm going to ask that we take certificated item 1J out of order. I would like to present to the board Christy Tersey and Jennifer Pilara as candidates for tenure. I can tell you that not only are they superb administrators, they are two of the finest human beings I have ever had the privilege to work with. And that what they bring to our district, it's interesting, they have similar personalities, so I can talk about them together in terms of energy and enthusiasm and joy and kindness. I was just thinking tonight, I don't think I've heard either of you ever utter a negative word about someone, which really says a lot. So I am proud and happy to ask the board to consider item 1J, tenure for Christy Tersey and Jennifer.
Motion.
Motion.
Second.
Second.
Discussion.
So I'd like to briefly speak about my experiences with Ms. Tersey and Dr. Pilara. Both of them brought their unique perspectives into their roles. I think specifically for Dr. Pilara, it's kind of hard to follow in the footsteps of such a great principal that she followed before. But she did it, and she pulled through, and she gave Lindell its own personality. Being a parent of 3 kids in Lindell now, she gave it its own personality. Ms. Tersey, I think it's so important that she comes in there, and science has always been something that we've been really wanting to engage at a higher level, and I think she's bringing the district in that direction. And they both do it with their own, I guess, style, and they focus on, the students and the buildings and the district. So I just want to say I'm very proud to help support this tenure.
Any other discussion?
I would just like to also say congratulations, Dr. Pilara. I've known you for a very long time. You really helped my children when you were at East School. And I remember how kind you were and how important it was for you to build positive relationships. So I'm so thankful to have you here in this wonderful building up and down to continue that beautiful work. And Ms. Kirsty, where are you? I kind of prayed for somebody like you to come along to help with Awaken our science program, and you really made it a hands-on program. Students love to learn. We can see the multitude of programs and the amount of love you bring. So I want to thank you, and I'm very proud to have you both here tonight.
You have comments?
I'll just lastly add, one of the best parts about being on the board is when we have these evenings. And for me, it's super special because I know both of you and you've touched my children's lives, especially Miss Flora. I feel like I've known you forever. And I think Sam definitely highlighted it. You went into a school behind a very beloved principal, a legend who's here with us today. Thank you for joining. And that was not easy, and you've done it with grace. And both of you are just a tremendous value to our district. And I'm really, really happy to sit here tonight too, both of you.
And I would just like to add, I haven't known you for that long, but I really see who you are, and I'm so pleased and so happy to be able to congratulate you both on tonight on your tenure. I remember what it felt like to receive tenure, and that feeling should never go away. Bring that with you throughout your career. You earned it, and congratulations.
And lastly, you've been in a tenure awards thing. I have my standard spiel. Perhaps one of the most serious charges of the Board of Education to grant tenure. It's a very, very serious responsibility to give somebody a vote on somebody's getting a lifetime appointment anywhere. In our voting, which we'll do, at least we've already voted, so you know what it is. We're asking, and we're expecting, that the energy and the love of learning and the passion and the commitment that you've demonstrated heretofore on which we're making this recommendation, that those same qualities will be apparent in you and in your work for as long as you stay here. That you remain committed to the kids in Long Beach, and you'll make every effort to give them everything they need that's within your power to give. So I don't have to add to the compliments of my colleagues here. Your performance speaks for itself. So I just want you to know that we take it seriously, we looked at it carefully, and we're about to take a vote that I think everybody knows what the outcome will be. So Mrs. Elsie, how do you vote on the tenure?
I vote yes.
Ms. Hayes?
Yes.
Ms. Conway?
Yes.
Mr. Pinto?
Yes.
And I vote yes.
Congratulations. Come forward to receive your flowers and take a picture. And then we'll take a short break for coffee and cake in the lobby. And then I am ordering both of you not to stay for the rest of the meeting. Let your families and friends take it up. Just, yeah.
The cake is this way.
Everyone is welcome to go have the coffee and cake.
Oh my God! Oh, it's good to meet everybody! Oh my gosh, I can't wait to introduce everyone. Have you never met me? Yeah.
Beautiful.
Emerson told me. Yes. They're nice girls, right? So they've got a nice home. They've got a nice home. You know my location? You look good. I have to know. I gotta know her. I know her. Yeah. You look great. I know her. Yeah, I know her. They're coming up to us. I know. They're coming. Got one coming up next week. Hey, what's going on? Hey. So weird when we're in another building. I know, right? And I wouldn't tell you. Holding it down. You know, Johnny has passed on. Yeah. Hanging. You know, it's not ridiculous. You know? Yeah. 1 minute you're good, then next minute you get, you know. Your dad, everybody's okay. We live on that's your mom. Dr. Gutierrez sends his love.
Right in front of the camera. I think we are.
Yeah, you guys are live.
So there we go.
Hi.
You love me.
We met at the school.
Yeah, exactly. When you first came out.
Oh, listen, I was going to say, you don't care who it's going to be, whoever it is. Good. Just traveling.
So this is Lily, and this is Tasha.
That's exactly what I want to do.
Maybe we could bring this back to the lobby, maybe? Thank you.
Mindy can attest to that, right?
Yeah.
It really was. That tenure is. It really was. Well thought out. Thank you. Hard stuff.
How are you?
It's new. Oh, really? Yeah, that's great.
Would you resume the meeting, please? Could we resume the meeting, please, and ask the board members to come back down? Could I ask the board members to please come down so we can resume the meeting? Thank you.
Next. Should I keep going in?
And before we go to the budget presentation, I just wanted to take a second to thank Ms. Dolan for ordering the cake and ordering the refreshments. Thank you, Ms. Dolan, for your efficiency and for always being there to take care of the details. I'll turn the meeting back to the superintendent.
Thank you, Dr. Ryan, and I will give to Vito questions.
Thank you, Dr. Gallagher. Good evening, everybody. This evening, we're going to be talking about technology, transportation, and athletics. The technology budget actually includes two different functions. So as you may know by taking a look at our line-by-line budget, the budgets first are broken out, the line-by-line is different functions. Technology has two functions, A1680, which is central data processing, and A2630, which is computer-assisted instruction. You'll see here in terms of what's proposed versus what's actual for this year, we're talking very minor changes and actually a net reduction in both of these functions in the technology budget. 1680 covers more of the infrastructure type expenditures, and 2630 covers the instructional software and student devices. That's how those two functions to categorize. Replacement switches, which are funded in A1680, will be partially reimbursed through the E-rate program, which is a wonderful program that the district participates in almost every year, and we receive about 50% reimbursement of the eligible expenses for this program. The proposed budget also includes funding for community hotspots, which allows student Wi-Fi access, licenses, and cabling. WAN and internet support is a major cost component of one of the line items, in case you're looking at that line item of A1630.490. Just a little primer in terms of understanding the line by line. The first four digits are the function, which is the broad category, and then the next three is what we call the object. And if it starts at a 0.49, you know that we're talking about a BOE expenditure. So we get this WAN and internet support through BOE. Funding for technicians, we have different types of technicians, BOE technicians and outsourced technicians through BOE, and they're split between both of those functions. The proposed budget also includes funding for student instructional software licenses such as Learning A to Z and Book Creator, as well as the Chromebook replacement program. So every year we purchase new Chromebooks and we replace those students' Chromebooks who've had them for a few years. So the incoming sixth grade is still incoming sixth grade, third grade, second grade now. Right, so now it's second grade because we started to actually give Chromebooks down in the elementary level down to second grade. We'll start with their Chromebooks and then it cycles through 6 and 9. Some student software licenses are obtained directly from the software vendor, while others are secured through BOE. So if you go through our list of student instructional software, you'll see some of those are licenses that we get right from the vendor because it's a better deal. Supply allocations are based on student enrollment in each school, so you'll see that those numbers vary based on the different enrollment in the different schools. I'd like to now talk about our transportation budget. Now the transportation falls into actually five different function codes. I'm highlighting 4 here because the fifth one is A5550. There's only $750 in that function, and that's for public transportation. If any of our students need to take public transportation, they're eligible for transportation. That's how we post those expenses. But the 4 main categories you see here are district transportation, the garage building, which are our mechanics, and different elements of the garage, contract transportation, those expenses for which we go out to a contract vendor, and then transportation through BOE. And you see in the various functions, some of them increase, some of them decrease, but overall we're talking about a net increase of about 3.79% over the current budget. So let's talk about what that includes. The proposed budget includes 51 slots. That's 46 in-house routes and 5 spare drivers for our district bus drivers and 28 slots for bus aides. Now we are fully funding these 51 slots, but for those who have been listening to our board meetings and following what's happening in the transportation industry know that it's really hard to fill those slots. But we are funding them, but it's just hard to hire them. So we actually do not have all of the 46 in-house routes. We don't have drivers for all those routes, and we don't have 5 spare drivers. But hopefully, continue to try to hire and recruit, we will get the full complement. So what happens now is that our dispatchers drive, our safety inspector drives, and we have all hands on deck is trying to cover the routes, but we do have funding in the budget for the 51 slots. And we are looking to add additional bus aides because we know that those bus aides really help on our elementary routes. And right now, we've allocated those bus aides to the elementary routes where we have a large number of our pre-K students. But again, I did add in some additional slots for bus aides. Hopefully, we can hire them and they'll fill those slots. We also have an increase in the allocation for the cost for parts and tires because we've been seeing those costs go up based on some inflationary pressure. The proposed budget for contract transportation includes a 5% cost escalation factor because that's what our bus vendors said that prices are likely to increase. At this point in our budget cycle, we have eliminated funding for the coach buses for certain student field trips because we have eliminated field trips from the budget and district funded actually field trips, and also the coach bus funding for the athletic competition and to NISMA. All of that is right now out of the budget. 2024-25 proposed budget for BOE transportation is reduced, and the reason why that's reduced is we're planning on shifting some of that work back to our in-house drivers, so we'll save some money there. So what you don't see in those functions, but what you'll see in A9901.911, which is transfer to capital for transportation, is funding for 2 new large buses, 1 new small bus and 1 new electric bus. So we have a bus vehicle replacement program where we would hire the older buses and bring in new ones. And this will be the first time that we're actually moving forward with the purchase of an electric bus for 2 reasons. One is that there is still some legislation in the state which says that we are not going to be able to purchase any non-electric buses after 2027. So we want to start experimenting with the technology, and so we're going to purchase one. But why aren't we purchasing more? Because it's very expensive. It's about $420,000 for 1 electric bus, and a typical large standard bus is less than half of that price. Athletics, the function in the budget for athletics is A2855. If you look in the line by line, you'll see the description is interscholastic athletics. The proposed budget is about just shy of $1.6 million. And the major elements are the stipends for the high school and middle school coaches. We're very proud of the fact that we have 55 high school and 31 middle school sports teams. That's a huge number of teams that we have that's managed by our super director, Mr. Epstein. And but we did, again, because at the time that this was prepared, we were facing some tough budget decisions, eliminated 6 assistant coaching positions as part of our cost reduction effort. And that's what we've been talking about over the past several budget presentations, about the different ways in which we were trying to reduce costs so that we can close the gap that we've been talking about. What's also in the athletic budget for 2024-25 we need to purchase some boys lacrosse shot clocks that are now required. The crew program that was previously included in the ARC grant is now included in the athletic budget. State competitions such as wrestling, swimming, and hockey that were not fully funded in prior budgets, they were partially funded, basically because we didn't know we were going to be doing as well as we have been doing in these 3 sports, and we really need to fund these fully so that we have the money when they go to these state competitions. We also have a 3% cost escalation factor for BOCES. There are various elements of the athletic budget where there's certain memberships and services that we get through BOCES, and they said that we should really consider a 3% cost escalation factor for BOCES. I have this up here that I just wanted to talk about because we did get a lot of questions over the past couple of weeks about capital projects and how it's distributed throughout the district. And I just want to take a moment to review this with everybody. So what you see here, and I just have a Lido complex. We talk about it as one complex basically because for building purposes for SCD, which is State Education Department purposes, the Lido Elementary School and the middle school is one building because physically it is one building. So it has one code with New York State Education Department. But what I want to point out are a few things. Lindau, West, and East, if you take a look all the way to the right with dollar per square foot, what we spent over the past 16 years is basically the same amount, dollar per square foot. You see 209, 219, 215. I also want to mention that when we talk about Lindau, we had set aside back 16, 17 years ago, $6.2 million to deal with emergency masonry repairs because at that time, the facade was actually falling off. For some of you who were here in the community at that time, you remember when we needed to put up sidewalk bridging outside of Lindell because the building was actually falling down. So we needed to do some emergency expenses. SPP, School Preservation Plan, if you take a look at what the board had decided back in 2008-2009 school year, the funding of $5.4 million was scope of work for East, and about $2.2 million at that time was the scope for West School. So that's an important point to keep in mind in terms of just distribution of funds district-wide. Then Superstorm Sandy hit, and then of course West had so much more damage. and also the mitigation that FEMA paid for. So pretty much the whole amount was refunded or reimbursed to us by FEMA under the Sandy category. It was based on elevating everything from the ground level up so that it could no longer be damaged. And what you see here at ETC, that's in an energy performance contract, district spends up $14 million. What it is it installed energy efficient features in terms of lighting, heating, and some other building envelope protections. And what that allowed us to do is to do work like put on some new roofs and do a whole bunch of other work for $14 million. And that's how that breaks out in those buildings. You see the bulk of it at the high school. So that was important because I think it's important for everybody to have the accurate information. I know I've been fielding a lot of questions, answering emails, and as hard as we all try to be clear in these budget presentations, still some people walk away with some information that's perhaps unclear. So we're going to continue to try to be clear, continue to share information with the community so that everybody's on the same page. I'd like to segue to some important upcoming dates, and then I want to talk about some news that we've received. So this evening, you see transportation, technology, and athletics. The next presentation in 2 weeks will be special education program. Then we'll have the budget adoption and the budget hearing, which is an opportunity for residents to either say what they like about the budget or what they don't like about the budget, but it can't be changed. So the budget adoption is that's the final board's budget that then goes forward to the voters on May 21st. So what I wanted to share is we received some interesting information in the past couple of days from out of the state in terms of what the one house proposal is. So for those of you who've been tuning in, here at the board meeting or either online, you've heard us talk about the reduction in foundation aid, the $4.3 million that the district was slated to lose based on the governor's proposal. Well, what the legislature is now presenting, and it's not final, but we have, good information that this is what's going to be presented, is that they are not going to eliminate what we've been calling save harmless or hold harmless, and that the foundation aid for next year is going to be at least the amount that we have in the current year, and maybe even more. Small amount more, maybe a 3% increase, but at least level. Now, it's not final yet, but it is the word that's coming out in terms of where the legislature is on this issue. And now the legislature and the governor will negotiate back and forth, and they'll come up with the final state budget. But it's pretty good news to say that if the legislature is coming forward with keeping this safe harmless, which, as you may recall from my explanation, has been in effect for many, many years, and that a district cannot receive less state aid than they have in the current year, will remain in effect. They also said, though, is that they want to take a look at the foundation aid formula and see what they need to do to redo it. So a lot of the same principles in terms of the wealth of the district, and I know it's not everybody's individual wealth in terms of what their income is, but the property wealth as a whole of the district, factored in with the enrollment, are still going to be main drivers. So I think long-term, if they redo the state aid formula, we still need to be concerned about what the future lies, but for next year, it looks good that our foundation aid will not be reduced, which is really great news. The other good news I want to share is that in terms of what our budget was for the current year, in terms of interest income, based on some calculations that we've done, it seems as though we're going to be earning more interest income than we anticipated because interest rates are higher than they've ever been. So it's hard for people who are trying to buy a home because the borrowing rate is so expensive. But for anybody that has some money in the bank, you're earning a high interest rate, higher than what we've had over many, many years. So we expect to end the year with a higher amount of interest income, which is great news for us. And when we spoke to our bankers, they said it doesn't look like it's going to come down much below 4%. Right now it's over 5%, much below 4% for the following year. Now, we always try to be conservative because we don't know what's going to happen, but it does help us in terms of our overall revenue projection for next year. So if the state budget is passed and the save harmless or hold harmless is intact, no reduction in foundation aid, no $4.3 million reduction, And if we do continue to enjoy some interest income, even if it's close to the level that we've had over this year, then we should be in a very good place for next year in terms of our revenue. And I know we've been talking about these concerns about our revenue over the past couple of weeks. And now if we have questions and comments from the board, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, would you like comments or questions on each topic individually or collectively, just make a difference to you?
No, whatever question, I'm happy to answer.
Any board member?
I have a quick question. In light of what you just shared, how is that going to impact our conversations about going into our reserves? And then on top of that, knowing now that we're in a different financial situation than maybe we anticipated, how is that also going to affect the tax increase at that
Sure. So I know that at the last meeting, we talked about using reserves in order to keep all of our operations going over next year in light of the reduction in foundation aid. At this point, I do not plan on needing to use any of the reserves. So I think we can safely say that any use of the reserves is off the table based on what we're doing. Now, again, it's not completely final until the budget's final, but the information that we've been receiving is quite reliable that we will not have to use any reserve funds to continue all of our operations for next year. In terms of the tax levy, I know at a prior meeting, I asked the board to go to the 5% in terms of what our cap number is rounding up to 2.5%. I don't think that we'll need to go that high, and I'd like to wait for a final number, but at this point, I think that we can safely say that we can probably go slightly below 2 at this point, 2%.
Okay, great. I just have one other question. It's just quick about the buses. I know you said that the electric buses are expensive, but you didn't say how much. I just thought maybe you could share that with the public.
Sure. Right now, an electric bus costs about $420,000, which is more than double the cost of a conventional standard bus. So in terms of trying to meet that mandate, we're purchasing one for next year to get us started, allow our mechanics, our drivers to become familiar with the technology. We're also going to buy 2 large and 1 small conventional bus, just so that we have buses in order to retire the older buses. It's not up until 2027 at this point, but we are hearing from the state that they may extend that because the technology is still not as refined as the end users would like it to be, and also the cost. Usually what happens is that as the technology improves, then the cost also comes down, and we haven't really seen that happening yet. So I know that there's some advocacy at the state level to push that 2027 deadline a little further out so that districts can prepare.
Okay, last question. Fully electric, I'm assuming, not hybrid? Is that
Correct.
And then this includes, you'll have a functionality in the charge.
Yep, we'll have to develop that infrastructure.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I have a question. Yeah, just regarding the hotspots, Michael, first of all, thank you for your presentation. Where are these hotspots, and what is the percentage of students who have reliable access to Wi-Fi outside of the school buildings?
Yeah, thank you. Good question. So I know that the hotspots are located throughout the community, and I'm going to, Dennis Pettis, our Executive Director of Technology, knows. I know we've done some surveys with families to determine the number of students that need this access.
So access-wise, we only hand out in a given year anywhere between 15 to 30 hotspots per families. That's taken care of one of our social workers who works with our homeless families and brings them and sets them up and whatnot.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yes, hi. Thank you, Michael, for your presentation. As always, you're always very thorough there, so thank you. So I wanted to start off with, when you talk about the central data processing and the computer-assisted instruction, why is there only such like a 0.98% in variance for the central data processing? Can you explain why those numbers are so low?
Yeah, it's just basically that in consultation with our Executive Director of Technology, that the current level of funding will support the needs of our students. I mean, we've also been mindful as we've been preparing the budgets this year that we were facing some tough challenges in terms of that rollover gap that we know we needed to close in terms of just rising costs in some different areas. And then we got hit with the news at the end of January, beginning of February, about the potential loss of the foundation aid. So I think in the meetings that I've had with all the district administrators, they've been really mindful of the economic reality that we've had to face this year. So they created jointly with my office a budget that supported what the students needed without something that was more of a wish list. So pretty much level budget, because the level of funding that we have, especially with the help of some E-rate programs that we know we're going to have in the future, to make sure that we have the infrastructure that we need, and also taking care of student needs with devices, and the software and the licenses, and the texts and things of that sort. So, we feel comfortable with this budget, knowing that, we really need to be meeting.
Because I remember a few weeks ago, we had students present their computer-based instruction and how excited they were about it. So that program is still going to be moving forward, and technology is still going to be.
Yes, no discussion.
My next question, I did have concern about the hotspots for the Wi-Fi access. You said there's 30. Is that equitable for everybody amongst the districts that they're given the Wi-Fi access? You said there's 30 hotspots to families. More available?
Yes, so in the office, right now, we've given out anywhere between 15 to 30 over the course of the years as I look. Up in the office, we have available up to 60.
So do you know why we haven't had more people reach out to us for that? No? Okay. Also, thank you. I'm glad to see that we're looking for better deals and we're looking for your cost analysis for better deals. We like that. I'm going to the transportation budget. Can you explain to us a little bit more why, since we have our own buses, why we need to contract out transportation and why we also need to have the BOCES transportation?
Sure, because we do not have enough drivers to handle all the work that needs to be provided.
And that's
Plain
really
and simple. Yeah. Also, just in terms of this driver shortage that we've had, some drivers really prefer to work for a contract company. So it's great that we can avail ourselves of them as a resource, because we need the drivers. We need to provide transportation. And something to keep in mind for everybody is we don't just provide transportation to our public school students, but we provide transportation to all of our students, whether they go to out-of-district special ed program or private school. So it's a large amount. There are about 1,000 more, 500 more students than what we provide transportation for on the special ed programs and our non-public transportation. Another 500 students.
So now, you mentioned also the bus aids. Do we also put bus aids on those buses if necessary?
Well, if it's IUP driven recommend or requirement, then we do have a bus aid for that special needs student. We try as best as we can to have bus aids on our elementary buses. And what we do is we try to rotate them or shift them depending on the needs of a particular bus. If we know a particular bus needs some increased supervision, we'll shift a bus aid to ride on that bus for a while, but we really do try to prioritize the highest number of pre-K students in terms of where we place our bus aids on the non-special ed buses.
So now, I know Ms. Pace mentioned the electric buses, and this is a mandate that's concerned us for quite some time, only because of the amount of money that each bus
And
is
the technology.
120 grand, and then plus the technology.
Yeah.
And then what about the training of our?
Yep. They'll have to be trained more than mechanics, right? They'll have to know how to maintain it, but I have to tell you, the biggest driver for not moving forward earlier was that we spoke to districts that had purchased some of these electric buses in the past, to find out about their experience, and they shared that they had problems with the technology in electric buses. So, we're hoping that with this next generation of electric bus that they're designing and producing for next year, that they'll get some of those bugs out in terms of the technology so that we can start experimenting. But I still think it's worthwhile to go forward with one and start developing some knowledge there.
Forgive me if you already told us how many buses we have. How many buses do we have or do we need for our students?
Right, so if you take a look, we have 46 in-house routes now, So which means that at the beginning of the school year, we have what we call a pick day, right? Which is when the drivers get to pick the routes that they choose, and it's based on seniority and that's contractual. So those drivers will pick the route, and we have 46 of the in-house routes. We'd like to have 5 spare routes, right, to 51. We don't have 46 drivers right now. And that's what makes it so hard and such a challenge for the department, for Mr. Dukes, who's the supervisor, for Cindy Zarati, who's the dispatcher, is that it's scrambling, right? And Salinas is our assistant dispatcher right now. You know, they are scrambling to try to drive and dispatch and supervise. And we have our safety inspector, who's also driving, because we don't have enough drivers right now to fill the slots that we have. So we've had a few vacancies from the beginning of the school year. So what they've had to do is they've had to say, okay, this is not even when somebody's out sick. So if you have a few people out sick, just imagine what that's like, is they'll say, okay, let's say if Cindy's driving, Cindy will say, okay, I'm covering this route. I'm also picking up some students at this stop and taking those students on my bus, and they end up splitting it all up. So it's been really hard. So the number of buses that we have, you know, we need at least to have 43, so each driver has his own bus. And then we need to have some backup buses, because when buses go for, if they're out, if they're having a repair, if they have DOT inspection, they have to pull them. So we have some spare buses too. I think total, maybe John, if you know what the bus number is, Cindy, what it is, or Trish, off the top of your head, I think we have maybe about 60. How many buses do we have total? Right, so about 60.
So it takes about 20 years, right, to build a fleet, would you say about that?
It depends. See, but what's interesting, and I'll give, you know, the deserved praise for our mechanics, is that some places, districts, they'll replace the bus after 10 years, some will replace the bus after 12 years. We can go at least until 15 years with car costs. So our mechanics is so great, they can keep these buses are on the road, and what it does is it saves the district money, right? So if you know you can get 15 years out of a bus instead of 10, you're saving money. So they do a great job. We always pass DOT inspections, and they're also prolonging the life of our buses.
Right, so what about the electric buses? How long is an electric buses life compared to?
You know, I don't know the answer to that. John, do you know? No, we don't know.
But see, that's what's concerning me, because I know that the governor put out a mandate that she wants us all to have these electric buses by 2035. And what concerns me is that if that mandate's not changed, what the pressure that's going to put on our transportation department, you know, that's really my concern. So as of now, you know, we're starting with one bus and.
That's right. And we're pretty much in the same boat as other districts. I mean, no one really like gone out there and started buying buses, electric buses, because of the technology issues.
Right, and the technology is constantly changing, so there's a lot of unknowns in that area as well.
Yes.
All right, and that's a concern. I also have just one more, thank you, about, you mentioned here, I'm sorry, the capital projects filled with NICEAD. Now, I know you explained a little bit about, you know, the amount per square foot. So whenever something happens in a building, you take care of it. You take care of it.
Absolutely. So the typical process is that the head custodian of the building, if they can't solve the problem themselves with their own skills or with some of their staff, the cleaners, they will put in a work order to facilities. And we have a huge, you know, work order management system, and that's where our mechanics, our carpenters, our plumbers, district in-house employees will go out building to building and address those issues if they can. If they can't, we'll bring a vendor, you know, a plumbing company or electric company if it's beyond the skill set or safety level in terms of what one or two people can do. Then, if we know we have to plan projects, you know, we will go forward, and as a board member, you know, pretty much each year we have a slate of capital projects that we know. We've used the capital reserve funds over the past years. You know, as soon as we have money in the reserve fund, we try to then spend it on something that's needed. You know, the biggest issue that we're facing right now is some of the pipes at the middle school. You know, in terms of leaking pipes, we had some issues with some steam pipe leaks over at East School a couple of years ago, but we were able to spend about $1 million there and we shored that up. But right now, what they're dealing with is what's happening over in the middle school with heat. And the fact is that they're original steam pipes, And that's why a couple of years ago, we funded the conversion from steam to hot water so that we can avoid those leaks. Because what happened in some of the areas of the middle school is we didn't have sufficient heat because we had to turn things off. And we were, playing back and forth to try to get the heat up in the morning and then to turn it down and then let it ride out. And, it's been challenging, but we have been funding all of these projects based on, what we get from our architect. Every 5 years, we have to do what's called a building condition survey, where we itemize all of the different elements of the buildings that need to be addressed. And that's typically where we then have a capital plan that addresses all of those needs. So we've been doing it on a smaller basis. 15 years ago, the board passed, what we call the school preservation plan, which is about $100 million. That was funded through a $92 million bond, $92.9 million bond. And then since that time, whether it was post-Superstorm Sandy or the energy performance contract or some of these annual capital expenditures, we can try to keep pace with the needs of the building. I know one thing that we had talked about is, when we were talking about doing a bond issue, and just for clarity's sake, because I know I had heard something that some people in the community thought that we already have the money. We don't have the money to do this new bond that we had talked about in the winter. We were planning on doing something, that $85 million. It was in the discussion stages, but we never did go forward. We can only go forward with that if it's on the ballot. So no, we do not have that money now, but we would like to, talk about doing that in the future, hopefully soon, because that involves mechanical ventilation and air conditioning in all of our buildings. And we knew that we couldn't do that in 1 year, right? But, 1 year's worth of funding. We knew we needed to do a bond for something like that because we didn't have $30 million in our capital reserve fund, or could we, raise the taxes just for 1 year to do it as a line item in the general fund budget to put air conditioning in all our schools.
And it takes about 2 years once we decide.
2 or 3, depending on the queue in the state ed.
Now, how is the roof doing at the high school after all this rain?
I know that they keep coming back and patching it. I don't know if it's the same leaks or different leaks, but I know they're making progress, but I couldn't tell you that there's no leak right now. Just when I know in my own house, all of a sudden I had a leak. Never had a leak before because of the rain, and that's what people are experiencing, is that they're getting leaks where they never had leaks before.
All right, and also I just want to say one more thing about the athletics budget. I know I'm going a little bit backwards, but I do want to thank all of our coaches for all the things that they do, and I'm really glad to see that we're including funding for these clubs and for these sports. Yesterday I was able to go to the Challenger basketball game at the high school, and it was fabulous. You had the boys lacrosse and the boys baseball team, as well as community members cheering the kids on, and there was a lot of school spirit. You could see a lot of love in the room. So I really want to give a shout out to our athletics budget, and to you, to be able to answer all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Collins.
Brief question. Technology is a very expansive subject between construction and also security aspects. Just to confirm, insurance for technology is out of our central budget, not this budget, right?
The cyber insurance is out of our central insurance budget.
Great, thank you. Also, just to give a shout out to transportation. Doing more with less people is really, really challenging. Transportation is always the first and last touch a parent has with their child throughout the day, dropping them off and picking them up. And I know there's a lot of stress involved with that, extrinsic factors of weather, with the crazy weather we've been having, and other drivers down the roadway. I just wanted to give you guys a shout out, kudos and all the hard work you've been doing.
Thank you.
Okay, last but not least, because sometimes I think we should do a 3-minute cap on board members. I just wanted to go back to the cyber insurance. Sometimes it's good not to be written up in Newsday. There was an article a couple of weeks ago about 28 districts that have been hacked. Oftentimes, school districts are the preferred site. School districts are the preferred site for being hacked. So I'm asking you, I don't need that thing. Why are we spending enough on cyber insurance in terms of that? So we don't get into Newsday like the 28 other school districts that were hacked.
Well, to answer that question, are we spending enough? We have cyber insurance through our basic carrier, the basic insurance. We also have additional cyber insurance. We consulted with different experts about what the proper level is, and we're getting the level that they say that we need.
Okay, thank you. You know, you talked about Chromebooks. Whiteboards used to be the hit. What's the state of the whiteboards in classrooms? Is there any expenditure towards that? Do those have a use in terms of a lifetime of use, or they need to be improved or updated or replaced?
Well, I'm gonna have to defer to Mr. Pettis on that in terms of all of those needs, in terms of whether it's a whiteboard or a smartboard or what have you.
Yeah, all of our technology has a replenishment plan.
Right.
So what you see here is the yearly replenishment for our students.
Right.
With our whiteboards, we yearly replace them as they.
In good shape?
Yeah, as
All
they
right,
come
thank
out of warranty and life.
Okay, you know, I was reading this weekend about the SAT digital going online. If that were conducted in our high school this weekend, would it have gone off without a glitch?
It went off without a glitch.
Great, thank you very much. Good to hear about that. A couple of weeks ago, the New York City schools got a snow day. They went virtual. It was terrible. We went virtual tomorrow. Would there be a glitch? We had to. Is that a fair question or unfair question?
You can wait for the microphone in this one second.
I believe that we are in a good place to go virtual if we needed to.
Hopefully we'll never need it, but.
Hopefully you'll never need it, but I believe the students and the teachers are perfectly capable of going virtual at any time.
Great, thank you. Good to hear. I also wanted to ask in terms of robotics, you know, I know the high school team's got a pretty vibrant team and it's sort of moving down to middle. Is there going to be movement to elementary? Would that be in this budget or would that be under curriculum instruction?
Well, it depends on what form it was in. If it was in more of a class,
Yes,
it would
enrichment or
be,
something.
it would be curriculum. If it was like the club, it would be the club budgets. I don't know where we are on that. No, bringing it down to the elementary, is there talk about, or any plans to bring it to the elementary level beyond what we do in STEM or our innovation labs?
Not that I know of. I know Dr. Osheroff could probably speak better to it. So I don't know if she wants to chime in.
So our fantastic STEM teachers do a certain amount of coding within their classes, and they do address the coding in different types of robots. Right now, we're not doing FLL, which is the elementary version of the FRC, which is what our high school students compete in. So they compete in the first robotics competition. They did really well in the friendly competition, so I'm very excited about their upcoming competition in Hofstra. And then, I mean, the idea of moving it down is an exciting opportunity. These are expensive clubs, but they're also clubs that really engage and excite students, and we certainly have the capacity if we have student interest. I'm sure that it's something that we can consider. It is not in the current budget line.
Okay, because I remember last year, the last school board meeting, the budget adoption, the school, there was a presentation by the high school robotics club. And we asked them, now's the time, speak now or forever hold your peace, do you need anything? And they made a comment in terms of that, so I'm hoping that that articulation on their part contributed to their success. It's good to see their achievement this year in terms of that, maybe that can sort of filter down to the middle. It's good to hear the mechanics moving up, doing well.
Yes.
Is that any mechanic shortage? No. And what's the state of the transportation depot?
Well, you know, we spent some work there. I guess it was I think the summer before, to shore up the wall in the garage. You know, we've done some work, small work over the past couple of years. I think that we have a line item from last year's budget to deal with the sewer line over there, because we get some backup. But again, we're trying to address things as they come up.
So oftentimes we so concentrated on the schools as we should be.
Yep.
I remember doing a walkthrough with Mr. Kramer there last summer before the beginning of school.
Yep.
And it is an area of concern in terms of that, since we've got 46, fleet of 46, and investing in electric buses. We want our mechanics and our bus drivers to have a comfortable place and setting. We also want our buses or equipment to be well protected. I think we have to keep that up. I think that's under 3 minutes. Thanks, Mr.
Thank you.
So
So does that mean I can't ask another question back? I do have just one quick question.
Sure.
Mentioning the robotics, I remember at that last meeting, the robotics team mentioned that they needed some type of truck to help lift their robotics.
Yeah, they got it.
They got it, thank you.
That's what it is.
And Ms. Conley? You good? Ms. Conley? You good? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Student organization announcements? Questions and comments from the public on tonight's agenda items only? Okay, I just want to remind people, if you're here for the first time, please keep your name and address. 3 minutes to speak to an item, only one time on that item. And Mrs. Dr. Natali will be not on her cell phone, but she'll be conducting the timer. She'll be a little bit of a ring when 3 minutes goes up. So thank you. Ms. Radler.
And we have 270 Shore Road.
That's about right.
That's the view. Don't stop my time.
Mine's not working either, Mr. Arvito seems to be a.
Here, you know what, you can take mine.
Thank you. Matt Adler, 270 Shore Road. So my question is with the tax levy, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you go below the limit, that then limits you the following year, correct?
Just please ask all your questions.
Okay, because from my understanding is if you do not go to the tax limit, then that inhibits you next year of your limit that you can go to based on the calculations without getting too many. Okay, so if we're uncertain about next year with the foundation aid, with the calculations and everything going on, would it be in our best interest to, no matter what the limit is, because I know that you guys have already spoken about piercing the tax cap, because you're not going to do that, it could be for another day. But if we go to the tax limit this year, then it gives us a cushion for next year if things do go south again this year. If we go lower, that limits our ability, because again, I would assume your opinion would be the same to not pierce the tax cap.
That's your only question, Mr. Adler?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Vito?
Sure. So, in short answer, the answer is yes. That if you don't go to whatever the max cap is, your base, right, would be constricted in future years. But just the flip side to that is that, you know, one of the things districts have to be careful of is they want to make sure that budgets are passed, right? And that's an annual feat, so to speak, of that, or an annual challenge, let's say, to make sure that we get our budgets passed. And to ask for more than what a district may need in the current year could work against a board or a community in the sense that they're asking for more than they actually need, and then what do? Well, what are they going to do with the money? They have some choices. You put it in the reserve fund, right? And then there are limits as to how you can access it. For example, the district has its full 4% in what's called the unassigned fund balance. It's about $6 million. That can be used for any purpose. We cannot really add to that because it's a statutory maximum of 4%. We did a couple of years ago just temporarily because we knew we were going to then use it to help fund $11.3 million of a capital plan a couple of years ago. And that was after COVID, where we had some money that we didn't think we were going to have because we thought we were going to have higher expenses during COVID. But besides that, once you get your max, which we're at, then you have to put it either in a TRS reserve fund or an ERS reserve fund or employee benefit accrued liability, right? And you can only use the money for the actual annual expenditure for that purpose. And so you couldn't necessarily say, oh, I'd say I ended the year with 4 million or 5 million, 6 million extra. I'm going to use it to offset a variety of general fund expenditures. It can't be done that way. It can only be used for whether it's $1 million of workers' comp or, $500,000 of a teacher's retirement expenditure. So, two things, right? If you did that, you'd be taxing the community for more than you actually need in the current year, and you're really only supposed to be doing that for a year. When you end the year with an operating surplus, sure, you can fund your reserve funds with that, but then you can only use it for certain purposes. So that's how I would answer that. That short answer, yes, it does limit your opportunities for increases in the future because your base is smaller. But on the other hand, if you end the year with an operating surplus, there are only limited ways in which you can save, quote, save that money for future expenses. It's very prescriptive ways.
I know what I'll say, Dr. Ryan, it's not supposed to be a dialogue, but okay, thank you. Two questions to follow with that. One, since the tax cap has been enacted, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's 99.9, don't quote me on that, budgets that have kept under the tax cap have passed. So it's almost unheard of a budget staying under the tax cap and not passing. Two, if the budget hasn't been set and voted on, with light of all this new funds coming in, the higher revenues, maybe we can then start to think about the cuts that were proposed previously to restore those cuts and then keep it there.
Thank you. Anybody else? Right, agenda only. Just going to suggest if you're in the back and you want to speak, you may want to just scroll down while they're here. Oftentimes you may not get to the mic, but just come to the.
Kristen Chesney, 61 Benjamin. A lot of really good news shared tonight. Thank you, Mr. DeVito. I appreciated seeing a priority on equity with the expansion of the internet access on topic here. I concur with Ms. Conley's sentiment. If we've got extra, we should get them out to people so that they're not sitting unused. I've really appreciated your efforts, Mr. DeVito. You've been really responsive with a lot of questions that I've asked. And you've been really timely with that as well. I think the time that you spend on these topics is really valuable, so it doesn't really bother me if you go over your allotted presentation time. I don't know how others feel. With regards to your comment about concerns long-term, I heard you talk about a potential increase to foundation aid. I did notice that the Senate budget provides an additional 3% of funding on top of full enrollment. That would equate to approximately an additional $600,000 if that's passed. I think additional interest is also exciting. I might have missed this, so if you could please clarify whether that interest is being accrued on our entirety of the reserves or only the unassigned fund balance. That's a pretty big difference in funds. I would also like clarification if only option 1 is being considered, with option 2 is contingency budget. If I'm being generous, I would say that there's been a little too much excitement with the budget this year. I think that it's fantastic news that the Senate rejected the decreases to foundation aid, rejected changes to CPI, and also rejected funding to review the formula. Senator Mayer's office said that they could not stand for the reductions given the poorly considered proposal would result in such significant unintended consequences. She said any considerations for change would involve stakeholders for thoughtful two-way dialogue on committee. I found this to be an incredibly poignant thought. If I'm not being so generous, this budget season has been a little chaotic and it's created a lot of divide. Dr. Ryan, you took responsibility for sending a letter in January that has created a lot of engagement and a lot of divide. I think we need to fix this, and I believe that it can begin with the passing of one option and a contingency budget, as I'm proposing. In the unprecedented event, the governor does not align with the Senate and the House budget. I did go back after my public comment last time, and I reviewed board policies, and I found that there is a mechanism for the school board at the discretion of the president to create a committee to advise the board. I did not find a policy on community engagement. So it would appear, if we believe that the New York State School Board Association is guidance that we should follow, that we should create one of those. For the questions for the board, I'm curious, is there a specific member of the board responsible for leading policy committees? How can members of the public seek to request and participate in creation of these?
And Dr. Ryan, are you committed to aligning with the best practices and establishing an advisory committee to inform the board on budget issues annually? It also sounds like a committee may be helpful to problem solve creative solutions to increase our driver pipeline as there's a shortage of the community. Can we go back to the topic questions?
No, in terms of policy, in terms of my ruling, certainly.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm gonna go with you, Mr. DeVito.
In terms of the interest income, the interest we earn is whatever is in the act.
Mrs. Conway and I are on the policy committee question. And the second part of your question.
Thank you. So I can
Members
just
who are
reach
on the
out.
policy committee question.
Thank you. Okay, I can reach out for more information for others. Thank you.
The income, interest income is on whatever balances we have in the bank. So it's all the money, so it's not just on the side.
Like
It's whatever we have.
$45 million.
It may not be always that amount of money because when we have to pay certain bills, when we get our tax levy money, some cash flow varies a little bit, but more or less it's close to that. I wouldn't say it's the full, because it varies, because sometimes some districts have to do what's called a tax anticipatory note, where they have to borrow in order to pay their bills, because we don't get our tax money until November or the first of it. So we don't have to do that. We can operate with the money that we have, but it may mean that we, have a relatively low balance, and so we're only earning interest on that relatively low balance. And then we get some state aid money, we get some tax levy money, and that's how that works. So, but it's not just on the $6 million.
Okay, that's just on the $6 million alone would be an extra $250,000. So we're talking about a lot more money than that. Thank you. And then I had one more question on clarification on whether option 1 is being considered only with option 2 is contingency budget. I just wasn't clear on that point.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
There were just several different options that have been presented over the last several budget meetings. I heard Mr. DeVito talk about how we're going to anticipate a lot more revenue coming in. He said we do not have concerns for next year. So I'm kind of just going back and saying, is option 1 the budget that we're putting forward, with option 2 being the contingency budget, and meaning that the state does not pass their budget, obviously in time for you all to make a decision?
Meaning to use the reserve funds?
Whatever option 2 was presented as was,
Yeah, I think what you would think, if I may help you just clarify, is that the option 1 that we had talked about was to close that $3.8 million gap,
yes,
which is where we already are. And I know we've had a little bit of discussion of the reductions that we've made so far based on that, about 1.3 million. And then we had asked the board to come up to about 2.5 million to close that gap. This was before any discussions about a proposed loss of foundation aid. Then when we heard about the foundation aid, we said, okay, now what are we going to do? Are we going to potentially close these schools? Are we going to do other cuts across the board? Are we going to have a pause? And I think that's what you're talking about, if I'm not mistaken. So I think what I'm proposing to the board right now is that just at the onset is that we do not have to use reserve funds based on what we're hearing. We do not need to use reserve funds to keep pretty much our current operation going for next year, but we have made some reductions already, as we outlined. So that's what I think you're talking about in terms of option 1. And then with the tax levy, before we got the good news about the interest income, we needed to go at least to the cap of 2.5. Now, I think that we can go below the 2%. Where we're going to end up is too early to tell. We still need to do some more work on that. But I can say that with the 1.3 million of reductions, the additional income that we're going to get through interest, if everything stays the same with foundation aid, we probably could go below 2% in the tax levy.
Okay, just really quick, clarify, is that all right? Okay. I think I'm hearing you say this will come up again in a later budget meeting with additional information. Thank you.
Yes, it will.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yeah. Yeah, Mike, yeah.
Karen Riskin, and 726 East Chester Street. And I have some important information to share. I have some flyers for you to read to understand as I speak for the staff here. Thank you.
Is this about the budget? Is this about the budget?
Absolutely. I'm going to read a little story, very brief, but very important. There's something, the Rapid Act is a bill that will be presented to the legislature at the beginning of April. To define a Rapid Act is the Rapid Act allows the government to take away our government from us. This will give them free rein to do whatever they want with our community. They also have a plan to take away our beaches. Then they can do this if the bill is passed. How it affects the school district, they want to fast track the construction of the wind turbines. And that would entail industrializing our community. Roads would be ripped apart and blocked. And they would be installing cables throughout our town. We have actual documentation that they are deadly. We also know that they are expressed it's a newly designed project. And it has never been done before. The school buses would have difficulty navigating the streets for picking up and dropping off the children. This project could take 5 to 6 years. I've given Mrs. DeVito a book of all the streets that will be involved. They have just added Lafayette to the list. The areas that are listed in the routing book are Long Beach, Lido, Point Lookout, and Island Park. I've been working with a dedicated group of people, and they would like to sit down with you to try to share more information on how to work with you and with your needs and some things that we'd like to share with you as well. Our community is ours to run. Our children are our future. We need to keep them safe. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sherry Packer, 120 Coolidge. I just have a few questions on tonight's agenda. Talking about transportation, and we were talking about how we don't have enough drivers, we can't hire enough drivers, and how many routes we have. One of my questions is about the late bus. It's been weighing on my mind for quite some time that we have a late bus for the high school, so that if you oversleep, you can take a bus to school, or if you have a study hall, you have a late bus. And then there are children like my own who don't get a bus at all, which is fine, because when I went to school here, I didn't get a bus either because I live that close to the school. However, I don't know how much this late bus costs or what it adds to our budget. Is this late bus still in the budget for next year? And why do we have a late bus encouraging children to come to school late? If you have study hall, go to school, go to study hall. If you oversleep, get to school on time. I'm a working parent. I have to get my child to school on time. Rain, snow, sleet, don't get a bus at all. So that's my one question about the buses. Another question is, you stated that you are eliminating funding for field trips. Could you elaborate on that? Is it all field trips across the district, daily field trips? Is it Frost Valley, Odyssey of the Vine, DECA, which field trips? You were talking about eliminating the coach bus funding. What does that coincide with? Is that for Frost Valley, DECA, same Odyssey of the Mind, whatever field trips? Is that all intertwined? What is it exactly that we're talking about? And finally, we've talked about that we're keeping a lot of money, so if we are eliminating all of these things, I'm not sure. And then we talked about sports. Which assistant coaches are we talking about? You're saying 6 teams. At the last meeting when we talked about eliminating, I believe it was winter track maybe that you stated, but that was the only one. You didn't speak of 6, so I'm just curious as to what this is all affecting.
So I can try to talk about the late bus. So I think there are maybe two different kinds of what we call late bus. One is the morning late bus, which is no additional cost. And what it is as the buses are coming back to the depot from west to east, there was an idea that they would just run as they travel along Park Avenue and pick up any students that perhaps miss the bus early in the morning to try to encourage them.
So this bus ends at, say, Monroe, I'm not even really sure where it's at. If you're adding this late bus, fine. Why can't it stop at Roosevelt, Pacific, and those corners if it's probably not full, and pick up those students who don't get a bus also? And add an extra corner. I know we've never had a bus, however.
So a couple of things there. But you're talking about, but let me just, if it's the morning late, it's what we really call the late bus. Usually it's the buses that are after school. Sure. So the morning bus was, and I don't think it's really being used that much, to be honest. But it was just, but it's traveling back to the depot. So it was no additional cost. It was just, hey, we know that this bus is going back to the depot, which is all the way. Yeah.
Okay, so I better get my kids to school, or he's gonna
Yeah,
have.
I can understand what you're saying.
Just gonna ask you, if you just let him respond to your question, please.
I can understand what you're saying. In terms of, so you meant the morning bus, right? The morning night buses, okay. In terms of field trips, at this point, this is something new, you know, that in order to try to get some of these, you know, to fill the gap, that we were gonna eliminate district funded field trips. That's where we are now. It doesn't mean that's where we'll end up April 16th, but that's where we are now. I mean, again, it's hard, like I prepared the presentation and that was in there, the numbers, and then we got this news today, right, or maybe late yesterday. So, you know, we still have to kind of catch up with ourselves in terms of where we are, and that's why these are discussions, and we have the final adoption in April, and hopefully that final adoption is when you have all the information, because by that time the state budget, right? So, right. So, you know, we'll see what happens then in terms of what kind of budget we end up proposing and adopting. But just in terms of the field trips, it was the district funded field trips. That was, at this point, that's not in the budget. And then any transportation that would support that. So some of the coach buses, like, you know, whether it's the places that you name, were also eliminated. If we're not going to have district funded field trips, then we don't need the district funded transportation for that. That's where we are at this point. I don't recall what your question was about Odyssey of Mind.
No, it wasn't about Odyssey of Mind.
Oh, the athletics. The athletics, right, so the 16s, right, like you said, the one that was identified, again, going back to the last board meeting, when a question was asked in terms of what's considered about athletics, I said, at a preliminary meeting that I had with Mr. Epstein, he said, no, that we're trying to really crunch numbers here and be as lean as we can. He had come up with that winter track assistant coach reduction. Then he was also asked to try to, you know, be a little bit leaner, and so we had some other reductions. And I don't know if Mr. Epstein is still here, I just would have to look that up. I think it's a varsity football coach, one reduction, just correct me if I'm wrong, varsity football coach assistant would be reduced. Girls volleyball, boys volleyball assistant coaches, so that's 4. We have the boys volleyball, girls volleyball, the boys football varsity, the winter track, and then there was the girls flag football assistant coach, and I'm missing one. Mr. Epstein, do you remember, or should I look at my notes? Gymnastics, right, gymnastics.
I must say, I hope that in the budget that doesn't happen with some of the assistant coaches, and the rapport that they have with the students is so much stronger and better than the head coaches. And it would be a tragedy to our students who are supported by those assistant coaches to lose them, but for some of the head coaches are not it.
Thank you.
Just, Ms. Becker, 1 second. I just wanted to also clarify the late bus or the late bus, maybe Jenna or Dr. Gallagher can explain, but there was also a genesis of that to try and drive down the chronic absenteeism issue that we were having. So I don't know if you want to elaborate on that, but that was the other sort of reason for it. There was a method.
You know, like where
I just got to clarify.
Thank you. Anybody else? No? Okay. Well, still on, here we are, yes. Nobody else, nobody else? Okay.
It's still related to transportation and technology.
Hi, Nicole Darienzo, 445 East Market Street. So I guess I just want clarification on a few items because we said that we don't plan to go to the tax levy limit, 2.5%, but we're worried about changes to state aid in the future, possibly making us have to make drastic cuts. Also, we don't want to go to that 2.5%, but our budgets typically pass by resounding margins. But we're worried if we add a little extra, it will fail. I'm confused about that. We were told in the most recent proposal that it would be risky if we went into the reserves, which I get in principle, but now we're also being told we don't want to pad the reserves too much because we're already close to our limit in how much we can have in reserves. If enrollment drops at East, so this is sort of shifting gears, but I think still in line with sort of being told two different things that seem contradictory. We're keeping East open for next year, but yet we're warning people that they may not want to choose East because, and I quote, it may be slated for closure in June 25. And I guess two final questions would be, if enrollment drops at East next year in response to the messaging that families have received from the board and the district that it may close, is that then going to be used as further evidence as to why East should close? You see what I'm saying? Like, if people choose not to go to East because you're talking about closing it, and then enrollment goes down, are you then going to say, well, enrollment's down, we should close this school that up until this time has been thriving? And lastly, will you send out communication sharing the new, better financial outlook from the state and CPI formulas and interest and all of that with the community as you did share all of the negative information? Thank you.
May I take the part about the reserve? So I know it can sound contradictory about the reserves, and that's one of the trickiest things about school finance. Even the auditors won't give us a definite opinion as to what the exact level should be, but what they will say is whether it's appropriate or not. And that's what they have said. So there was a time when our reserves had about 10 to 15 million more in them than they do now. And a prior Board of Education has made a decision that they wanted to use some of those reserves instead of keeping a tax levy at whatever that level was. The level that we're at now, right, in terms of the general fund reserves in those specific accounts and that 4% is about the same level that we had about 16 years ago. So we don't want to use it so much. Again, I said that I was comfortable using it for 1 year if we needed to, right? We're not in that same position now, we don't need to. But we also need to be careful in the sense that, are we going to be increasing the tax levy, increasing the burden of the community to pay more in taxes to increase our reserves when the auditor had said that the level that we have now is appropriate? We can do that if, that's a decision that's to be made. And I know it sounds tricky, but at the same time, you don't want to overtax the community. You want to just ask for what's needed. If we end up ending the year with an operating surplus because either we got more revenue than we had projected, which can happen sometimes, or we didn't spend every dollar that we said we were going to spend, you end in surplus, you then have the opportunity to put some of that money in a reserve fund. So that's really what it's designed to. It's not really designed to say, okay, we're going to increase the tax levy based on what we don't need, which is overtax, so then we can, and I keep using this word, but then we can pad the reserves, because I wouldn't even say it that way, just add to the reserves. So it is a little bit tricky to kind of find the nuances in there in terms of what's the appropriate level for our operating budget, which is about $55 million. How much reserves should we have? Which reserves account? What are we going to do with those reserves? When should we use them? It's more of an art than a science, I would have to say. But I do understand why it may seem contradictory. I can only just leave you with this thought, which is that even though our budgets have passed, and last year it passed at a really high margin, I think part of the reason that they have passed at such a high margin is historically we've only asked the community for what we needed. And we know we have a history here of not asking for more than we need. Being really mindful of the impact that those increases have on our community residents, especially those on fixed incomes. And that's my obligation and my job is to prepare, and it's kind of a term of art, a responsible budget. So hopefully that gives you a little bit more information in clarifying that piece of it.
It does. May I ask a follow-up question? Okay. So one of the reasons Long Beach School District was slated to lose so much money if the foundation fee formula was reset, I understand enrollment's down and I understand our property values have gone up, but also we do get more state aid as a portion of our budget, right, compared to some other comparable districts. So wouldn't, and the governor actually said that a lot of districts are sitting on boatloads of reserve funds, so like.
Not us.
I mean, that is what she said though, right? So that was one of her reasons. And if we're afraid that down the road, the foundation aid formula may wind up cutting our state aid drastically, then wouldn't it be prudent to potentially pad or add to the reserve fund to sort of, if we're worried, if we're saying like, listen, some of these cuts may still be on the budget in the future because the foundation aid formula is potentially going to be revised, then shouldn't we potentially prepare for that?
Yes, and can I just say one thing about the enrollment? When we talk about enrollment decline, and this is really important, it's the district enrollment decline. It's all the elementary schools. So when we ever spoke about potentially closing East School because of enrollment, it wasn't the East School enrollment. It was, I just wanted to clarify for everybody, it was the district-wide elementary enrollment.
Would you be willing to answer any of the other questions I had asked?
So in terms of communication, we will send something out. I had prepared something earlier, and we're just going to review it again. Some additional things that we will be
No, I mean, the only other thing is, and maybe we'll be here again next year, I hope not, but that like if enrollment's down for pre-K and kindergarten, will that be used?
Clearly, we would not do that.
Okay.
If it's our doing by giving parents this extras, we don't do that. Yeah, you're looking at it this report, not just this.
Thank you.
Have some, just one second. Thank you.
Joanne Capp, 445 East Olive. And I have to say that this microphone is more conducive to my height. So I have a couple questions. I know we have to kind of rapid fire them. So this one is really for Mr. DeVito, who spends a lot of time explaining things to us. So when we saw the graph at the secondary presentation, it had 1,360 elementary school students. But then when we got the transportation, the ridership, that the enrollment across all 4 elementary schools is around 1,560. So the graph doesn't include pre-K, but the current enrollment for elementary school is 1,560. So my question is, around enrollment, even though we're showing that it's down, don't children equal children, right, in terms of like resources and space? And why have we not included that number?
So I don't know any questions.
I'm not, but I don't.
I'll make a note, so I'll get back to
Can you
you.
make a note? And then secondary, I know it's been said, and Dr. Ryan, you took responsibility for this, and I think this is super important, and I would like the board to kind of answer us on this question. As parents, I think the initial email, although not intentional, had created a lot of hate in our community. And there was a lot of celebration around closing the school at the last board meeting. Some of us parents got teared at in the parking lot. There was clapping. I sat and we've talked about it, and it has been very hard for our community. And I think that it's very important that there is an email or some sort of communication sent to the whole district addressing that we should not be celebrating a closure, we shouldn't be planning greenhouses, that this should be a last resort and this should not be welcomed with open arms. So I hope is that something that you are willing to do? Sorry. And I have two more questions. Dr. Ryan, this again is specifically to you. When this conversation happened in 2011, East enrollment was around 339. Right now it's at 336. And in the Herald, you had said that East is not just a building, it's a community and it is families. And that is not what we heard at the last board meeting. I just want to know what had changed. Why has your sentiment changed? And then I think and then my last question is, with all of this amazing news and great everything, right? All good news all around, why is East still on the table to be closed in 2025, or has that changed? And that's it.
I'll take the first one. So the chart from the prior presentation does a K-5 enrollment, so that 1360 number is K-5, and that pretty much matches what our K-5 enrollment. A couple of students, maybe off, and that could be that moment in time, and maybe some of the day-to-day they shouldn't be, but whether it's 1360 or 1357, it's pretty much the same level. That's K-5. We have about 200 pre-K students, so that's the difference there. So the numbers do work in terms of what we're transporting pre-K to 5 and the K-5 enrollment. The reason why I just did the K-5 enrollment is again because pre-K up until this year was half day. So it really, and we get our aid pretty much, is K-5 pre-K is separate grant, so we really think of pre-K as separate, even though now the pre-K students are riding on the bus. So we're just trying to be fair in terms of, they are riding on the bus with the other K-5 students, but this is the first year that they're doing it, and all the other expenses, except for, a small amount that's carried in the general fund budget, is covered by a special pre-K grant. So that's the reason why they're two separate numbers, and it's just easier to measure enrollment decline with what's reported in the state report card, because that's usually K-5 type of reporting.
But is it still not enrollment doesn't equal kids, like all of the children enrolled in the district?
Well, right, so
it is
but I
up,
have K-5. It's just, again, the reason why I just did this because I wanted to have an apples-to-apples comparison, right? In terms of the K-5 enrollment, because that's really what's been tracked over the past, 20 plus years. It's just, this is the first year we have a full day pre-K. We can certainly say that, our pre-K to 5 enrollment is 200 kids more than the 1360, but what are we comparing it to? You can't then compare it to a prior year's K to 5 enrollment because we're adding the pre-K kids this year. In the past, they were half day. So I just, again, for apples to apples, in order the state reports data, and in order to have a very accurate graph, we did K to 5. Now the pre-K kids, we had half day. It's varied over the years in terms of how much, but I don't think that's really to me a material difference in terms of why I didn't include that in the K to 5. I love the pre-K kids out because again, it's a separate grant.
And I wasn't asking about leaving them out. I was just asking because I was actually looking at the transportation ridership, and when I calculated, I was just asking more so that enrollment is actually up if you look at the total children enrolled in Long Beach schools in comparison, correct?
Well,
or elementary.
not really, because we had pretty much the same number, but they were half day. So you take a look back to when we got our pre-K grant before the expansion grant this year, and we were awarded based on 196 half-day students. Okay. So that number has fluctuated over the years. We actually had more pre-K kids, half-dayers, about 15 years ago, and that's why our community partners like the JCC, Temple Emmanuel, actually ran the UPK program. But the 196, whether it's 196 or 200 where we are now, it's kind of consistent. I wouldn't say it's growing. We had half day before, now we have full day, but I wouldn't characterize it as growing.
Okay.
Sorry.
I think the next in line, first is I was not with this 20 celebratory behavior at the last school board meeting. So I'd be likely to address anything I didn't see. I don't do Facebook and social media. I don't do Facebook and social media. I may be the only one in Long Beach that doesn't do it. So I'm not, once again, witness to anything on that concerning anybody celebrating the peace. And as for my comments in 2011, I was actually in favor of closing these. When the hospital closed, I thought it would be too big a hit for that part of the community. So that impacted my decision at that time. Now, presently, as I made an indication either the last meeting or the meeting before, I see one of my primary responsibilities as being a fiscal steward in terms of enrollment, in terms of conditional fees, in terms of the bond proposal that's been talked about, that's been sort of deferred, to spend $9 million of that amount of money on the air conditioning lease, I had serious questions about it. So in terms of moving forward, also the fact that I've been here in this district and the school is close to 46 years, probably older than most of the parents of these schools. And in terms of the implications of this, I see that the other elementary schools have plenty of room. Facilities are great, and that tempered my decision. I don't have anything bad to say about East. It's a wonderful place. I was at ballroom dancing last week, terrific in terms of that. I've been in and out for 46 years. But I think if in fact we're to look to the future, and I'm constantly worried whether it's Washington, New York State, or Long Beach about spending, and spending what we don't have, I seriously question. I haven't changed my position even with this news from the state in terms of the option I present. And it's not against anybody at East School in terms of that. It's just my interpretation and my responsibility as a school board member and what I think is best for the district. That's my responsibility. Thank you.
There's one about the letter, even though you haven't witnessed it, I think, do you not agree for anybody that does have social media or on the board or has been or has witnessed it or has been at roundtables with PTA members from other schools, do you not, is that something that you would consider doing? Okay, thank you.
I'll just comment on that and say, I think I tried to highlight at the last Board of Ed meeting.
And you did.
And I just want to reiterate that this was never, one or the other. And I think the misunderstanding, and I'm just speaking for me, not for the board, this is a process. It's, when you go through a budget process, you start in one place and you end in another, always. I think the misunderstanding here is that we started in one place and we're probably going to end up in another. And that's just a function of what happens that is outside of our control. And I have not personally witnessed in here, I didn't see what happened in the parking lot, but what I can share very transparently is I have seen not only the community go up against East, but I've actually seen East parents go up against us, go up against our superintendent, and go up against Mike. And none of that is productive. So what I would say is we sit here and try and do, each and every one of us, the best we possibly can for this community. That's what we're elected to do. And Dr. Ryan is 100% right. That includes being fiscally responsible for everyone. And I need for the community as a whole to have patience with everything and everyone and trust the process a little bit more. That is not me putting blame on anyone. I just need to say out loud that I don't agree of anybody coming after you guys, but I certainly also don't agree with what I've witnessed coming towards the board as a whole. So if you're asking if I support something going out to say something about that, I think it should be very wholly inclusive.
I agree.
This has been divisive from the minute that letter went out. And that letter, I wasn't here at that Board of Ed meeting, but I can say that however it was interpreted the way it was, but the intention came from a good place. and came from a place of transparency. It didn't hit that way. Sometimes you hit, sometimes you don't. But, you know, it's important for me to share that with all of you. So I think, you know.
And I think we agree. I think that letter would help both ends, right? It would help our East parents that have come against and have done this, and it would help on the other side. So I think it is not just for the East parents, I think it's for us as well, right? So thank you.
Thank you.
Joanne Meyer, 94 Michigan Street. With Chicago coming, I'm sorry, I would have left the city in, but I have to go pick up my daughter at rehearsal. With Chicago coming up this weekend, I know the students were going to come and request. My daughter is co-president of the ITS group, the Theater Society, and they were going to request some things, but with budget cuts, they did not come. And like robotics, you know, there's some things they need to. There's more than 80 students that participate in the musical, and obviously fewer in the drama, but they have 2 shows a year. And it would be nice, there's Roger Reese Awards and also the Jimmy Awards, which would be nice if they got to participate in. We nominate students for that. And I would also, side note, love to see more scholar artists, because I know we have a lot of scholar athletes in this district, and I'm sure we have some amazing art students, art, theater, music. So it would be nice if, along with the robotics and the competitions they're doing in the arts, we're also doing those same programs. And hopefully we look forward to seeing you all this weekend. It's going to be great time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Stephanie, 125 National Boulevard. First, before I get to my questions, I just want to say that I know I should be standing up here and be really excited that hold harmless was not cut, but unfortunately, I don't feel that way at all because it's been a grueling few months, and I'm sure for you guys as well, just going back and forth about whether my son's school is closing, and it's really affected my household, my kids, a lot of my kids' friends, the teachers. So I don't think we should be celebrating knowing the damage that all of these conversations has had on our community. And now I just want to ask a few questions. I spoke to someone at the registration today. I know Dr. Gallagher, we've been emailing about pre-K registration. And she had said that someone had told her that because she does not have a sibling at East, she cannot put East down as her preference. Is that true? Well, I think that the muddled communication around enrollment is a huge issue because there's people that are telling me that they thought that they cannot enroll. And I know there's an asterisk, I've seen the form, but I just think because of all of our conversations and the internet and the fact that the decision about pre-K at East was just stated like a week ago, the week of registration, I think that there's parents that don't even realize that they can register for East because of that.
To clarify that, in the mail-in, the preference forms aren't due to the 25th.
Okay.
East is listed as a preference, and there's a visitation fee.
Yeah, so she did say that it's on the list for tours, but that she's under the impression that because she doesn't have a sibling that she is unable to register. So I just think that we should make that more clear. I also wanted to ask when we will know if East is offering pre-K. My 4-year-old asks me every day when I place his older sibling on the bus, am I getting on his bus? And I don't have a response.
So I can tell you that I think we counted 7 pre-K siblings. We need about 15 in our section, and I would expect there to be at least 7 or 8 people who live in the canals and perhaps want their child close for pre-K even could mean potentially moving them again. But the bottom line is you'll know as soon after March 25th is being planned.
Okay, and then also, if there's enough interest, like let's say we have 19 people that want to go for pre-K, would we add, or are we going to be turning people away? Like, what does that look like?
So here's the tricky part with pre-K. 18 is both the maximum and the goal because the funding is allocated per student. So we have to put a teacher at a full-time, the equivalent of full-time TA, usually a part-time. The name was done in the classrooms, no matter how many students are there. So to get to 18 really helps us maximize that funding. That being said, it's always a little, especially as we try to figure out how many sections, how many people will register late, what we're saying is you need about 15. If there were 19, that would be a problem because you can't open 2 sections of, 10 and 9. If we got 2 sections of 18, we could do it. We just have to look at that and kind of balance those sections out.
Okay, and then my last question is, well, I guess I have 2 more. So for when we're going to eventually decide whether we're closing East or not, or I guess first let's clarify, will that still be a conversation, knowing that we're receiving everything and more than we thought? Are we still going to be meeting to discuss whether we're closing East?
I guess I defer to the board on that.
Sorry.
She's asking for clarity on, is the conversation about closing East still continuing? Closing a building.
Okay, speaking for myself, I've already made my position.
Yeah, thank you. But does anyone else want to add to that?
It's still part of the discussion, it's an ongoing discussion.
Okay.
It is an ongoing discussion.
I guess I want to know why. I mean, I know that we had talked about enrollment declining, which we also addressed. It's now declining because of the conversation, so it is a catch-22. But I want to know, with all of our funding coming back, plus we're having some sort of a surplus, why are we still discussing closing East when it hasn't been a conversation in 10 years, and our enrollment has seemingly not declined? I mean, across the board, it's declined. It's not solely at East School, so why are we still talking about closing East?
Once again, I made my position clear in terms of the condition of the building, in terms of the potential bond, in terms of investing in the building, in terms of the condition of the other buildings, in terms of what they could offer in terms of the kids, and not compromise the educational quality of any of the buildings. That's where I stand on this, in terms of this. And is that the last question?
No, I have one more, and I guess it's for Mr. Indigo. So if we were to close East School, according to the numbers that you've stated in the past, we would have around like a $4 million surplus, right, from closing it. What happens with that money? Because I know you had already stated tonight that the reserves, it can't necessarily just go and sit in our reserves. So what is more important than keeping East open that we need that $4 million for?
So I can say we certainly can add to the reserves. I wouldn't necessarily say that it's a strategy that we want to do in terms of adding to it. But in foundation aid, right, which I don't think is likely that it's not going to change at all in the future, it can be used for a few different things. It can be used to enhance programming district-wide. Again, board decision. It can be used to lower the future tax levy, to reduce our baseline operating costs, and those, or a combination, or it can also be used to add to certain reserve funds, so that we have it in case we need to tap into those. Also reduce the tax levy, reduce our baseline operating costs, and increase programming elsewhere. Restore some of the cuts that we've talked about, or even have some enhancements, like maybe elementary enrichment, something that we've talked about that was grant funded, maybe somehow support something, or something else that the district feels it needs, but just shift the funding a different way. And that's part of the discussion that I think the board is willing to entertain over the next, 6 months or so, is some of these questions that you're asking. I don't think, again, I'm offering it. It's not really my decision, but I'm just offering some different options about what can be used. I don't think the board would say, okay, we're going to close East School and then take that money and put it in one fund. I don't think that's something that would happen.
Yeah, I guess I'm just, like, if we're going to close a building, I think we should just think really hard about the $4 million that we're closing the building in order to save, and what is more important than keeping this building up to date for the students and keeping class sizes down and everything that comes along with closing the school. What is equally as important for that $4 million? And if it's putting it in savings or creating a few programs, is that as important to wreak havoc in 300 students' lives? Thank you.
Answer your question.
Yeah.
Won't you walk right without answering your question? And I don't know if you're gonna like the answer, because it's sort of a non-answer, but it's an honest answer, which is, we have to continue the conversation. And that's kind of why we're putting this pause on it, in my opinion, right now. We need time, the board needs time to figure out what's gonna happen next year. And so that's sort of where we are. And just like the budget is a moving process, right now, we're in one place, and 6 months from now, we can be in a completely different place. So in my mind, taking the time to give it a year is going to give whichever Board of Education sits up here alongside Michael and Dr. Gallagher, time to really vet that up. So it's sort of a non-answer, but it's an honest answer. And it's kind of a hard, I think what you're asking is you want to pin everybody and say, I want to keep it open or I want to close it. Nobody wants to close the school. Nobody can, I did not get elected to the Board of Education to sit here and my last year on the board say, guess what? My legacy is closing a school. That is not what any of us want, but I think we want an answer that I'm just not prepared to give.
I just want it to make sense. Okay, just the last thing and then I'll be done. I chose East School. I have only lived here for 10 years. I didn't go to any schools here. I toured them all. I picked East. And when I picked it, there was no conversations about the school closing. I just want to know why, what has changed in the past 2 or 3 years. The building is the building. It's been the building since 1920. We know what it is. Nothing has changed. So I just want an answer as to why now?
I think what's changed is the landscape of what we saw happen with the budget process in Albany and what we can expect over the next few years or predict that we're probably not going to be flush with cash. I could be totally wrong. But I think that changed, and I think when you take that onion and we peeled it back and we started looking at the potential of losing funding, you're forced to make really hard decisions. And that's where it came from. It wasn't this hidden agenda that, we're going to slip this in here and close these. That is not what happened. And I picked East as well. My kids went to East. It's in my community too. I love the school. I'm over here with my dog. So, I think, like I said, you're asking really hard questions, and I know you really want answers. I know you all do, and you're invested. You have kids that are invested. I get all of it. I just don't know that anyone up here can give you an answer that may or may not change, and then you're stuck with that answer. You answer publicly, it's like you're stuck with that answer. You guys know that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, moving right along. Treasurer's report for January 2024, no action necessary. Motion for approval of minutes for executive session and regular meeting of February 6th, 2024, and executive session of February 12, 2024, February 15, 2024, and executive session and work session meeting of February 27, 2024. Second? Any discussion? Kelsey?
Yes.
Ace?
Yes.
Starlight?
Yes.
Pinto?
Yes.
Presentations of superintendent.
I'd like to ask the board to consider the remainder of certificated personnel.
Second.
Any discussion?
I just like to recognize Ms. Rundo, who mentioned on the list, the first one. My kids love her, the district loves her. We're gonna miss her.
Any other discussion? Okay. Kelsey?
Yes.
Ace?
Yes.
Starlight?
Yes.
Pinto?
Yes.
Item 2, non-certificated personnel.
Motion?
Motion.
Second? Any discussion? Kelsey?
Yes.
Ace?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I'd ask the district clerk to read the decision resolution for the residency appeal. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Long Beach City School District hereby upholds the residency appeal of student identified in confidential attachment A dated January 20th, 2024, and authorizes the board president to notify the parent or guardian of its decision in writing.
Motion.
Second? Second. Any discussion? Chelsea?
Yes.
Please?
Yes. Yes.
Pinto?
Yes.
I'd ask the board to consider items 4 through 7 together.
Motion, may I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I would just like to thank for number 7, the acceptance of donations for the $1,000 from Optimum to the high school robotics club, and for the $400 from the Records to supply corp. Thank you very much.
Any other discussion? Chelsea?
Yes.
Please?
Yes.
Conley? Pinto?
Yes.
Number 8 is the first reading of an amended policy on public use of school facilities. No action is necessary. I would ask the board to consider items 9 through 11.
May I have a motion? We have a second. Any discussion? Chelsea?
Yes.
Please?
Yes.
Conley?
Yes.
Pinto?
Yes.
Would have been any additional to our business?
Just new business. I attended the World Language event at the middle school last week. I thought it was great organization of different cultures, really different backgrounds. The food is great. The middle school did a great job. Good job to all the students and parents involved.
Anybody else?
No, I already mentioned going to the challenge basketball game. How great it was. Thank you.
You didn't mention the athletic boards?
That's right, Dr. Ryan. Dr. Ryan and I went to the, Winter Awards. There's been so many things that have happened. I just want to thank Mr. Epstein, because he always puts on a wonderful show for the awards for our winter sports. There wasn't a seat to be had in the high school. You could see the camaraderie between our coaches and their players. And, you know, our coaches really go above and beyond for our student athletes. So it was really a wonderful night.
Anybody else? Any questions and comments from the public?
Hi, is it working? Okay. Heather Lucasio, 636 East Park. I want to just comment on what Ms. Conway said about Mr. Epstein. I think every time he puts on a award ceremony, it's amazing. He makes sure that every single one of those students shine. Now, by saying that, we need to do the same for our arts and our music students. Our music students do not get year-end things. They do not get awards, and their parents, when they're seniors, don't get a flower. I don't know how this works, if it's athletics prepares it, if it's music, arts, and ed that prepares it, but if you look at reports, I don't have the exact date of the report, but the National Pediatrician Association says that children who participate in music, whether vocally or instrument, do 28% better in math and in science classes. And while we talk about all these budget cuts, possibly, maybe, we don't know what the future is, I just want to stand here to make sure we remember how important music, art, and ed is. And I'd like to close by quoting a parent of a last year senior, she had a sophomore this year, and she wrote this last year after we completed Little Mermaid. She said, and a final word on the kids in the show. Every child on that stage brought something unique and special to the table. The kids in the cast were so inclusive, supportive, and genuinely fond of each other that it was inspiring. In the teen world filled with trauma, narrative, victimization, and outrage, these kids did not get that memo. Neurodivergent, queer, special needs, all races, identities, and ethnicities were represented, and each kid was given the opportunity to shine. Now more than ever, our kids need more of that in their lives. High school theater changes lives for the better, and anyone thinks that it shouldn't be funded to the sky should have been at Long Beach High School this weekend. There are so many opportunities out there for our children, like Ms. Joanne Meyer said before. There's the Jimmy Awards, there's the Roger Reese Awards. There are so many opportunities, and our school district, for whatever reason, regarding like the music and the arts and the ed, just is not aware of these opportunities. Scholarships for music, arts, and ed students are not available. And I'm not saying that they're not available out there, but we don't know about them. And when parents apply for scholarships for their students, you go on our website, it says, put in your social security number. Red flag number one. Because you don't know if you're going to a real website or not. So I just think as much effort as put into the athletics, and again, bravo, Mr. Epstein, I've been with you for years, and I think you were wonderful. We need to do the same thing for our music, arts, and ed. That's it on that. And one last thing, this is at nobody in particular, this is just a general statement for coming to these meetings all the time. I really think it would behoove everybody to not make these meetings 4 hours long if we could stick to them 3 minutes. Thank you.
Matthew, after 270 Shore Road. I'm not an advocate for closing any school. I stood part of you guys 10 years ago fighting for East School. I'm a staunch believer in public education. Most of you guys know me well. I heard two phrases thrown out there. A fiscal steward and fiscal responsibility. I know you guys have been really discussing and researching closing the school. And if you think about the true savings when you close a school, it's not closing the school, it's selling the property. That's really where you make the savings and where you're going to come from. So let's play this out a little bit. You sell the East School property. One of two things that I can see happening with that property is a developer is going to come up. And Long Beach residents know what's going to happen. They're going to build there. They're going to go to the zoning board and change zoning laws, and the zoning board's going to do. Then they're going to come back and say they need a pilot. And what's going to happen to the school board and the school district, you're not going to get the full taxes that they anticipate. That's a bad situation, but not as worse as what I've ever seen happen. Charter schools. They're increasing on Long Island. I can see a charter academy coming to Long Beach, taking that East School property, where they have millions and millions of dollars overpaying for that property. Not worrying about a pilot, but even though out in Riverhead, even though they're taking tax dollars, they're looking for a pilot. But buying that property to open up a charter school in Long Island, in Long Beach. You want to be fiscally responsible? That's not the way to go. Look at the two districts right now, Amityville. They're laying off 47 staff members because of the budget crisis. Their superintendent has said the reason they're in that budget deficit is because of the charter schools in their community. From last year to this year, the number of students that have gone to the charter school have increased from 35 to 55. Doesn't sound like a lot, but that has increased and lost 27% of their budget, from $924,049 to $1.1 million. That's just a fraction. Go out east, where Riverhead, 545 of their students go to charter schools. It cost the school district $11.6 million. So I'm telling you right now, we close East School. My prediction, you have opened up the crack for the charter schools to come onto our barrier island, and it will be a cancer, and it will negatively affect the public education system in Long Beach for generations to come.
Announcements, Nova Scotia Beach Association. Administrator, supervisory, PBS group.
Good evening, Keith Beaslin, President of ACPG. On behalf of the members of Group B, we'd like to congratulate Chrissy Jersey and Staff Jeff Malora on their tenure plan. Congratulations.
Parent teachers, I think, I'd like to make a motion to go. Oh, sorry.
I attended the PTA legislative conference in Nassau County recently. And they talked about that our biggest crisis right now with our children is a mental health crisis. We're the worst mental health crisis that we've seen in many years. And that I kind of noticed earlier when we were talking about budget cuts, I saw social workers in my class. So I know that we need to be fiscally conservative, but when we're looking for budget cuts in the future, it shouldn't be areas where, that are supposed to be helping our children during that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'd like to make a motion to go to exec.
Motion.
Second. All in favor? Just want to explain, you're welcome to stay. We're going to go in and just talk about personnel and some other matters. We're going to come out during the meeting. We have no idea how long it's going to be, but
Video film.
Thank you.
How does it work? How does it work? Coordinate spend time with it.
No, I'm going to this. Thank you for coming. Yes, yes. All right, I'm out of here.
The amp was off.
I gave us some dates. June. I didn't want to come to
What am I paying you to do?
Oh, that was all on
Not an
YouTube.
AV.
Yeah, it's
children.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's.
What's my problem? He's like, I can stand Oh my
You still working at the beach club?
Yeah. We're doing that. Keep working,
Hey, how you doing?
So tell me, since you've done so many of these things.
Take care. Have fun.
See how it is next time, but. Thanks, Lori. He's outside if you want to meet him.
I have to hang here.
Should I tell him?
No, not now.
Okay. You know where I am.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Lori.
My second is
Thank you, Chief.
Oh, you're welcome.
What's up with the microphone?
Oh,
Impact technology.
You're okay?
Thank you for taking care of the case. Thank you for taking care of the
Great job, Lori.
Yeah, Lord, thank you so much.
Okay, motion to adjourn?
Motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good
night.
Thank you, Lori.
Don't step too late.
And,
Good night. All right. Part of it, everybody.
just very nice.
Go. Yeah.
I didn't realize it, I know